Hello everyone, welcome to our series of System Verilog for verification. In this video, I will explain about three things. First is about class constructor. Second is how to access data properties and methods using dot operator. And third is how does dynamic deallocation of memory happens in System Verilog. Now, let's start with what is a class constructor. It is a special function which is used to construct objects. As in our previous video, we have seen how we can create object using new function. This new function is only called as class constructor. It has two major roles. First is it creates objects and allocates memory for the same. Second, it initializes the properties of the class. In System Verilog, a default new function exists for all classes. That is, a compiler creates a default constructor automatically if we do not provide the definition of this new function explicitly. Now let's understand this with an example. So here I have defined a default. So here in this example, I will be using the default constructor. So let's see. So inside this module test, first, I have defined a user-defined data type result underscore t of data type enum, which can have values as pass or fail. Second, in the properties field, I have defined three properties: marks, roll number, and result. Now, when I use this new constructor, firstly, our object is created, and second is it will initialize the value of these properties. Since here we have not defined a new function definition explicitly, compiler will use default constructor. And this default constructor initializes the properties to their default values. Now let's see what will be the values of this property when we call this new function. So since marks is a data type of int, it will be initialized to value 0, since int is a two state variable and the default value of a two state variable is 0. So if we talk about roll number will be initialized to x, since it is of data type logic, and logic is a four state variable whose default value is x. Now if we talk about enum, which is result, so what would be the with what value will result be initialized? So in System Verilog, the default base type of enum is int, and since int is a two-state variable, result will be initialized to 0, and 0 here means value pass. So result will be initialized to value pass. Now let's move to explicit constructor. Since in the previous example we were using default constructor, we can also customize our constructor. So we can define this new constructor explicitly and we can customize it as per our requirements. If we do not define compiler, if we do not define compiler will create one automatic new function, that is a default constructor, which I explained in last slide also. So new method will always exist for all the classes. Now here is an example of explicit constructor. So here in this module test, I have explicitly defined this new function, and which basically defines what all operations will occur whenever I will call this new function. So when this statement is executed, this new function will initialize marks to 50, roll number to 1, and result to pass, thus making our constructor customizable. Now, we can also configure our properties values while initializing. How can we do that? This can be done by passing arguments in the new function. So when we pass the arguments, so while calling the new function, we can provide the values with which we want to initialize our properties. So here, whenever I am calling the new function, I have passed 40 as in the grade section and 2 for id. So marks will be initialized with 40 and roll number will be initialized with 2, thus making our constructor runtime customizable. Now let's move to dot operator. Up till now we have learned how to create class and object. Let's learn how we can access and modify the properties. So this can be done using dot operator. This dot operator is used to access and modify properties, and it is also used to call methods of an object. There are two ways to access properties. One is accessing directly and second is accessing through class methods. So now let's see this using this example. So if I want to access this property marks directly and I want to modify it, I can use this dot operator. So after the class handle name, so here we have created a class handles s1 of class student. After class handle, we provide this dot and give the property we want to modify and initialize it with the value want to modify. So here we have modified the roll number to 20. This is one way where we are accessing the property directly. Now the other way is we can access this property through class methods. So here I have created a function explicitly for initializing this roll number, and I have provided the argument here so as to initialize it with this value. So with this handle I can call this method using dot operator, and inside that I can provide the value with which I want to initialize this property roll number. So here I am initializing the roll number with 20. So we have seen here that we can access the properties using dot operator either directly, which is this, and either through class methods. Now let's come to, now in this slide I will explain how does the automatic deallocation of memory works. So for better understanding, I will be using the same class student with a custom new function. In this new function, I will be assigning the value of property marks during runtime. So here I have in the modules test, I have created two handles of student s1 and student s2. So first I'm creating an object of for s1 using new function. Now what will this do? So here by using this statement s1 equals to new 34, one student object will be created and its marks will be assigned as 34. Now, when I call this second statement, S1 equals to new 40, what will happen? A new object will be created whose marks will be 40. Right? A new student object will be created whose marks will be 40. What will happen to our previous object which was created using the previous new function? Since it is not at all used, it is not stored in a, it is not being pointed by a handle, it will be destructed. So system verilog will automatically destroy this object since it is not used currently. Now we have a second handle also s2. When I assign this using this new function, a separate student object will be created, and since this object is assigned to a separate handle s2, so our previous object will also remain, memory of previous object will also remain, and this new object will also be there. Now if I assign the s1 handle again to a different pointer, that is null, what will happen? The previous object which we created, that will also be destroyed. So now s1 will be pointing to null, so the final result will be s1 will be pointing to null and s2 will be pointing to a student object. All the objects that were created in the intermediate process, they all will be destroyed since they are not currently used by any handle. Any handle is not pointing to them. So that is how the automatic deallocation of memory works. All the objects which are not being used currently, they will be automatically destroyed by system verilog classes. That's all for today. Thank you everyone.